I want to thank our sponsors, Athletic Greens, who created AG1, one of the most innovative packets of supplements, including 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. These ingredients support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. I personally started using Athletic Greens and love the way I feel in the morning after I drink it. And I no longer have energy crashes throughout the day. And the best part is that it's delicious. The founder of Athletic Greens created AG1 because he experienced a ton of gut health and ended up on a complicated and expensive supplement routine to recover. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Yasmeen. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/Yasmeen, YASMEEN, to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hi, my name is Yasmeen Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Dr. Beth McDougall, who has been in the medical practice since 1998 and is the founder and medical director of the Integrative Medical Clinic, serving the San Francisco Bay Area since 2002, an early pioneer in orthomolecular nutritional medicine and European biological medicine. Dr. McDougall was among the very first group of doctors to be trained in functional medicine back in 1998. Her new book, Your Pristine Blueprint, explores her life journey and professional experience that led to her current understanding about the energetic basis of health and disease, rooted in our degree of resonance with the unified field. I was introduced to Beth through Dr. Francesca McCartney from the Academy of Intuition Medicine, and I'm super excited to welcome her to the show. So welcome to the show, Beth.
Thank you so much, Yasmeen. My pleasure.
So, Beth, in your book, you talk about the field that connects us all. What do you mean by that?
Well, we exist within a field of energy and information. And this field is highly structured and organized and incredibly potent. And we exist within it, and it exists within us. And then we and every other aspect of our material reality emerges from this field as a unique manifestation.
So, and how does matter emerge out of this unified field? And what does that mean? I think for our audience, which is pretty mainstream, if you could break down some of these concepts for them so they can understand what that means, like how matter emerges out of it.
Well, I mean, the field has been described by physicists and philosophers and even mystics for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's like Nikola Tesla, for example, and Walter Russell described the field as like an incredibly rarefied gas, almost vibrating at infinite velocity. And so you can think of this just, kind of incredibly fast vibration at the most quantum level of this field. And this is going to sound a little kind of like esoteric, but you can imagine that there are waves within the field. And each wave is going to be distinct based on its wavelength and frequency. So you might have one that kind of distinguishes itself from the backdrop of this infinite vibration. And then you may have another one that's slightly different based on its different wavelength, different frequency. And then if these intersect, they're going to create something different. They're going to create perhaps an eddy and kind of like a circular motion that in and of itself has different information. And then these can coalesce into something that has more complex information. And so you can almost imagine that these kind of intersecting waves of information create kind of a geometrical blueprint or template that can allow for things to emerge out of the field.
Fascinating. So what about, people, two different people or two even different rooms intersecting with each other at different, energy, I guess, speeds or wavelengths or whatever you want to call it. What happens? Like, does the higher resonance take over? How does that work?
Well, I mean, maybe we first should just talk about how does a human being, something as complex as a multicellular organism like a human being, how does that emerge out of the field? And I think that might be a good place to start because, my sense is that at the moment of our conception, when the sperm from our father penetrates the egg from our mother, there's this flash of light that's been shown by current science, and also a sound that occurs, and it's like a photoacoustic boom that informs the field, almost provides this kind of perturbation within the field that ends up becoming this kind of geometrical three-dimensional template for our physical form. And this blueprint guides our development as we're developing as an embryo, and actually contains the information set to orchestrate our exquisitely complex physiology. So when you think about how complex our physiology is, we have 37 trillion cells, each with millions to billions of chemical reactions happening every second, but in a coordinated manner. And so right now, current science really can't explain where that level of orchestration is coming from. But I'm maintaining that it is provided by this kind of operating blueprint, this blueprint that has the instruction set, has the kind of information field that's required to orchestrate our physiology. So you were asking, say that again. I mean, you were saying like, what is it? What happens when two human beings come together? Is that what your question was?
Yeah. So I've always been intrigued by the differences in our own energy when we interact with others, and also when we interact with spaces.
Yeah.
So if two people, have very different kind of energy frequencies or vibrations, like how does that play out? I know it's kind of like a esoteric maybe question, but I'm just curious, from your perspective, like, does the higher frequency win?
Well, I think that it's all about autonomy, honestly, and whether someone has like a good sense of autonomy and sovereignty, where they can maintain kind of their own personal boundaries. So I think you can be around another person that has a very different vibration, kind of that is maybe not necessarily compatible with ours, or a vibration that is not something that we would like to kind of pull into our inner circle. But if the person has intact boundaries, they can interact without it affecting them.
Got it. Okay. And then let's move on to this Pristine Blueprint, which the book is about. What is our Pristine Blueprint?
Well, I was describing it a little bit earlier. It's just that right at the moment of
Right.
our conception, this three-dimensional kind of template forms that I believe guides our development as an embryo, and then provides the operating instructions for our complex physiology. So it's literally this data set that's kind of orchestrating things. And then as we go through life, this blueprint can become contaminated. Just because every single thing in life, whether, we're talking about everything from like a molecule to a vitamin to a mineral to a toxin to a microorganism, has its own energetic signature. And some of these things are compatible with our field and our collective blueprint, and some are not. And so as we go through life, we tend to collect misinformation in dissonant energetic signatures, through incorporation of toxins and possibly having infections. And then I think even collectively having traumatic experiences and unmetabolized emotions that are left in our field.
And I'm also curious, especially since like the pandemic, I think has been so hard on so many people. Have you noticed in your practice that people's pristine blueprints has changed significantly in the last couple of years?
Yeah. And I guess I'd like to say, I don't think their blueprint has changed, but there's just a lot of dissonance that's almost like static on the radio. And during the pandemic, I saw this. It was interesting, not in everyone. So it was one of those kind of moments in my practice where I was able to see so clearly how a person's mindset and what they chose to pay attention to, and how they lived their life in made such an incredible difference. Like I would have in a given day of my medical practice, during the height of the pandemic, conversations with people, and some people would be saying, I'm feeling the best I've ever felt. I've really enjoyed this time. Just have a lot more time to myself. I have a lot more time with my family. I'm spending a lot more time outdoors. I, adopted a meditation practice, and I've been exercising, and clearly there are like I've finally started writing that book I've always wanted to write, or I've been painting, or and they would just be on fire. And then the next person, their life had contracted down to such a small degree, just into such a small form. And they were incredibly paralyzed by fear. I had people that were unwilling to even leave their house and go on a walk because they might pass by someone else on the sidewalk and they thought that was dangerous. I had couples where they stopped having sex because they thought that, it was dangerous for their health. I mean, I had people that were just, they didn't like their families. They didn't like being around their families. And so, it was just so interesting to watch almost the dichotomy where, people were having such radically different personal experiences in the same kind of setting overall.
Wow, that's such a powerful point. Yeah, it's almost like there were just multiple worlds happening during the pandemic, and I think also just in terms of like our resilience, what resilience we had before, and also what we were able to muster up in our current situation was really fascinating too. Because I felt the same way. I was profoundly surprised by how many worlds people were living in. So, in your book, you talk about the definition of the soul and how sound shows up in astrological influences. So, I'm curious, how does sound impact our lives? There's a lot of sound healing modalities that have become very popular recently. Yeah, I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you?
That's a lot there. Well, as I was talking about the kind of the formation of our blueprint and how current science has demonstrated a flash of light at the moment of conception. When the sperm penetrates the egg, there's this flash of light and a sound. So it appears that the sound is what informs the field. It's almost this photoacoustic boom. And you look at spiritual traditions throughout, multiple spiritual traditions talk about, in the beginning was the word. And there's so many traditions kind of believe that matter arises from sound. And, if, it contains all the frequencies in existence. And if ohms cease to exist, the world would cease to exist. Like these kinds of this kind of thinking. And so we know that sound has kind of a profound effect on the field, really, which is you can almost think about like sound traveling through kind of a liquid medium, let's say. And so the planets in our solar system are are enormous resonating bodies. Like you can go on to NASA satellite websites and listen to the individual sound of every planet in our solar system. And the sounds are very distinct based on the size of the planet, the composition of the planet, the rate of its revolution, all of these things are going to influence the sound that planet makes. And, if we had sensitive enough kind of like instruments on Earth, we'd be able to tell that like every plant had a different sound and every rock had a different sound and everything has a sound. But when we're forming, you have these enormously influential resonating bodies in our solar system that are going to influence our blueprint formation.
Oh, so fascinating. And so what kind of practices do you do when it comes to kind of supporting sound healing?
Well, sound is an incredibly powerful tool because, oh my gosh, there's so much to say here. So, it's one of those kind of percussive vibration type of waves. It's a different type of wave. And it can, I believe, break up kind of concretized energy within our energetic field. So we think about, the traumas that we experience in our lifetime. And sometimes we're not equipped to fully deal with those traumas at the time. And, we don't necessarily feel all of the emotions around that. And some of them remain stuck in our field and literally, I think, form these kind of concretized energetic densities that actually are going to influence the way we view the world and our perceptions about things. It, kind of influences our projections onto other people. It's almost like the kind of these cloudy lenses that we're looking at the world through. And so the sound can be used to break that up. So I have, for example, in my clinic, a vibrosound bed, which is where you've got a water bed that has a colloidal mineral water in it that's really the similar composition to our inside of our cells. And you're lying on that bed and there are these huge speakers underneath, these kind of sound transducers that are projecting sound up through the water, and it's vibrating through the water into your body. And then you're listening to sound on special headphones and kind of seeing a visual display of sound, actually through your eyelids, behind your closed eyes. And that experience is really transformative for people because it almost transports you in such a way that it's this the closest thing to like a plant medicine journey without ingesting any substances. And that percussive vibration just seems to break up these concretions in the field. So there's that. And then interesting, I'll just say another technology that I've been really interested in and working with. So our voice contains so much data. We think about as we're speaking, literally there's pockets, almost like balloon-like pockets of data coming out of our mouths. So every cell in our body is connected with the autonomic nervous system. And the vagus nerve, which is kind of one of the primary nerve in the parasympathetic nervous system, is connected with our vocal cords. So it's translating information from all of our cells to our vocal cords, and that's coming out in pockets of data as we're speaking. So I've been involved in a company that measures the sound in your voice and can actually provide information about your physiology based on your voice. A 30-second voice print collected on a cell phone can tell you about your, not only basic things like your sleep quality, your level of hydration, but very specific things like what toxins are in your body. Do you have infections? If, do you have elevated mycotoxins? Do you have any cancer cells, et cetera? And so, the using it as a medical diagnostic device is a little far away, but it's right now data is being collected by machine learning to really identify each of these indices. And on the flip side of that, there's a related company that I'm involved with that has developed special headphones that are able to transmit frequency data in a kind of like infrasonic way. So below the kind of normal detection of sound, they're able to transmit information signatures of things. So, for example, can transmit the information signature of vitamin C or the information signature of vitamin D. Or, for example, we did a study that was really cool where we had just a very small pilot study. We had 12 people that had a history of traumatic brain injury go to a neuroscience center and have a 19-channel EEG brain map done. So they were able to kind of diagnose this brain trauma on an EEG and the specific nature of it in these 12 individuals. And then each one of them spoke in their cell phone for 30 seconds. And then the company developed a set of tones unique for each individual, kind of based on the outlying frequency set data in their voice. It's almost like kind of like corrective frequencies that would correct the outliers. And the person then listened to a set of tones for 20 minutes, and then they had their brain EEG'd again. So that was all they did. They did the EEG, they spoke for 30 seconds, they listened to a set of tones for 20 minutes, and then they had another EEG of their brain. And the neuroscientists that read the EEG said they noticed more improvement in the brain with that 20-minute session than they would normally see from 2 times a week neural feedback training for 3 months. So sound is incredibly healing and important for the body.
Wow, amazing. I'm so fascinated by these technologies, and I'm curious if they're going to become a little bit more mainstream, or they're just still kind of in development
Yeah.
or early stage. And if you need a beta participant,
Yeah.
I'm available.
Yeah, the sound bed's available now, and the headphones are. So that was a pilot study. We're designing new research studies to be done, and then it won't be too long before they're available for people.
Wow. Oh, that makes me so excited that there's going to be so many different modalities to kind of counteract the impact of, I think, I guess, modern society of so much noise, a lot of media. Our attention is kind of scattered all over the place, and I think people are really stressed on many levels. So I love that there's these new technologies. So Beth, you talk about healing dissonant signatures in our energy field. Can you talk about what, first of all, a dissonant energy might be, and then how you go about healing them?
Okay. Yeah. So again, I would kind of put dissonant signatures in a few different areas in the body. I mean, just categorize them in a few different ways. So I would say we collect dissonant signatures from toxic exposure. So this would be, pesticides and herbicides like glyphosate and heavy metals and mycotoxins from mold exposure, maybe biotoxins from previous infection exposure, maybe pharmaceutical residues, things that are not compatible or beneficial to our physiology. That these things can create dissonance. And what's interesting is that the dissonant signatures can remain even after the physical substances have gone. So, for example, you may someone may have been exposed to a whole variety of petroleum solvents, and then you've done a lot of detox to get those out. But the dissonance can remain in the system because it's almost like imprinted into the water compartments of the body, like a homeopathic remedy, so to speak. Which is, if you take, let's just back up for a second. How do you make a homeopathic remedy? Well, you take something like, let's just use the example magnesium, the mineral, and you put it in water, and then you vigorously shake that up, and then you take 1/10 of that solution, put it in another vial of water, shake that up, and then 1/10 of that, put in another, and you do that sequentially down, 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 you will get to the point where the signature of magnesium is retained in the water, but there are no more atoms in the water. So it's just the energetic signature that's retained in the water. And so even in our case of our bodies, which is 99% water by number of molecules, the information signature of a toxin can be retained in the water of the body. And so, so one category would be toxins. The other category would be infections. So, I mean, I have so many examples in my clinical practice where someone has, let's say, Lyme disease, and then I do the work of treating the Lyme disease, but they're still affected. And then I have to do kind of like a procedure to pull out the information signature of the Lyme disease, and they finally start feeling better. And then the third category, which is probably the most complex category, is the kind of signature of traumatic experiences. So, we have these things happen to us as we're going through life, and it's kind of almost universal in the human experience. And, like I said a couple of times already, it's just sometimes we're not equipped to deal with it at the time, and it remains imprinted in our field. And then you have the unmetabolized emotions associated with that. So, Dr. Candace Pert is someone that really influenced my thinking early in my kind of path. I brought her in to speak in my medical school in 1993, I think, and or maybe even 92. But she, at that time, had, was kind of doing the work at the NIH around her book that came out called Molecules of Emotion. And what she said at the time was that you can produce the same effect at a receptor site in a cell from a molecule as you can from the energetic signature of the molecule. So she said that like a molecule has a particular vibratory signature, the receptor on the cell membrane has a particular vibratory signature, and you can produce the same effect at the receptor with the vibratory signature as you can with the molecule itself. So that was like kind of an aha moment for me back in 1992. And I just have really thought about that ever since. And most of the companies that I'm advising for or, involved in some way are based on that thinking.
Wow. So can you say more about that? So in terms of our emotional world, like let's say we are going through a difficult time or that we keep thinking about something negative. I mean, how does that affect our physiology? Like maybe we can get like a practical example for folks.
Sure. Yeah. So then, later Dr. Candace Pert put out the book Molecules of Emotion, and basically what she was saying in that book was that emotions in, let's say thoughts engender an emotional response in us, and emotions are associated with a particular cocktail of neurotransmitters and hormones. And my thought is that these each have their own energetic signature that's unique to them. The release of neurotransmitters in the brain, each one has a particular energetic signature. The release of hormones in the body, each one has a particular energetic signature. And collectively, that cocktail has a particular energetic signature. And when you look at the work of, let's say, Dr. David Hawkins, he wrote the book Power versus Force and went on to write a whole variety of other books. And he measured basically the kind of vibratory rate of emotional states in human beings and found that certain ones were very strengthening to the human biofield and other ones were weakening. So emotional states of peace and joy and love were incredibly beneficial emotional states. The vibration was enhancing to our system and kind of, maybe transmuting to dissonant signatures in our body and health promoting. Whereas emotional states like anger and sadness and, deep shame, for example, were very weakening to the system. And the vibrations of the collective cocktail of those emotional states were very deleterious to the health.
So how do people, or maybe some advice you can give folks who maybe, like, let's say, stuck in a shame or anger, is it just simply commanding yourself to move into a different emotion? I mean, how do you guide people through that process? Because I think a lot of folks like intellectually know this, but then can't actually do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier said than done sometimes. But I think it starts with an awareness that they do have the power to change their emotional state, and not changing it is very, very detrimental to health. So it starts with that awareness. And then I think also understanding that no matter what happens in life, whether it's a death of a loved one, or the loss of a job, or the loss of a relationship, or someone did something unkind to you, or you've lost a whole sum of money somehow in a business deal that went bad. I mean, like, no matter what happens to you in life, it is still your choice how you're going to react to that. So we often have these kind of like knee-jerk reactions to the things that happen to us in life, and very, very oftentimes that's kind of related to our familial programming and our societal programming, and kind of like this kind of belief system that certain things that happen are good and certain things that happen are bad. But nonetheless, we still have a choice in every situation that we encounter to decide how we're going to react to it.
That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. um, so the human biofield is something a lot of folks talk about. Again, I think our audience might need a definition. What is the human biofield, and how does other people's energy or stuck energy show up in this field?
Yeah. Well, the human biofield is literally a field of light that surrounds the body, and the bulk of it is within an arm's length distance on all sides. So, kind of to each side and front and back and above and below. And it has light that is coherent, very different than kind of just light in the environment. The light in the human biofield is coherent, more like a laser. And that laser light actually has very deep purpose in the body. You can almost imagine like you're outside and you take a magnifying glass and you kind of take the rays of the sunlight and you kind of focus them in a particular way. Well, then that light can do things, can burn things up, for example. Well, the laser light of the biofield is like an instrument, and it can focus the energy and information in the unified field that we exist within, and transmit it into the body to actually affect our physiology. And the coherency of our biofield or auric field, depending on what you want to call it, can be disrupted by the concretized energies left over from previous traumas, like we were talking about earlier, and the kind of collective, unmetabolized emotions and the energetic signatures associated with those. But one of the things that can be most disruptive to the coherency of the human biofield is other people's energies. And that's something that was really brought to light to me by Dr. Francesca McCartney, the person that we both know. And really, you think about our unique blueprint creates this kind of beautiful orchestra that is unique to us. It's like we have this score of music that is ours and ours alone. And it's this incredibly exquisitely complex score of music. And then you take the energy of another human being that has their own score of music, and you pull it into our field, and you can imagine that creates dissonance, that creates disharmony. It starts to kind of drown out the orchestra, so to speak. And our information set that should be orchestrating our complex physiology starts to get confused. So there's almost nothing that's more weakening to our health and, to the perfect orchestration of our physiology than other people's energy that enters our system. And, why does that happen, that other people's energy enters the system? It's usually something that kind of gets set in place early in life. So you have a child, for example, whose boundaries are repeatedly violated in some way, whether it's just, kind of like emotionally or physically. And the child gets to be accustomed to having other people's energy in their field and really not knowing anything different. And so then later in life, they tend to merge with other people, and whether it's their friends or their significant other, or people that they're interacting with, and their boundaries are porous.
Fascinating. So what do we do if we have issues with boundaries? Like, what is sort of is there like a methodology that you could walk folks through to, I guess, clear other people's energy? I know we call it OPE.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I mean, it's very similar to a lot of what we learned in the Academy of Intuition Medicine with Dr. Francesca McCartney. I think most importantly is first developing a practice for yourself where you're grounding your energy down into your physical form and really getting to know and become accustomed to your unique energy, like the feel of it, the sound of it, the visual representation of it in your mind's eye. Whatever it is that is kind of your identifier of your unique sound. And then you can become much more aware of when other energy enters the space, or you can become aware that something doesn't feel quite like you. So the more time you spend getting to know your unique sound, your unique self, the more foreign energies will be highlighted to you in your practice. And then you can learn how to ground these off. And then you can learn about your own auric field in terms of your own felt experience, and kind of develop techniques for fortifying your boundaries.
Mm. So, Beth, this is a kind of a good follow-up question. What do you mean when you say we must know ourselves? What does that mean?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I deal with a lot of really complex disease in my medical practice. And when someone's had a disease for a long period of time, like a chronic multi-infectious disease, for example, so they come in with chronic fatigue syndrome, or, kind of like neuroinflammatory disorder, or, some profound autoimmune disorder or something like that. Usually, if it's been with them for a long time, they need to do some very deep work to unwind it. So we need to work on all levels, for example. So, maybe we're treating infections, maybe we're helping to balance their hormones and replenish some nutritional deficiencies, and, clean up their gut microbiome, and, kind of things on a more physical level. But inevitably, in the process of their healing, they're going to need to do some deep work of kind of developing a meditation practice, and kind of that's body centered, so that they can tune into areas of their body that that feel off. Like, for example, if they have chronic pain somewhere, they can feel into it and really begin to discern what that area is trying to tell them. Or I have a lot of people that have like neural inflammation, pain, inflammation in the nervous system. And so it's more about, in order to fully unwind it, they need to kind of tune in to that and sit with it and almost learn how to ground it off and ask questions and figure out what it's there to teach them. So that they can trace it back to its origin, and maybe some events in their life that were there at the time that it originated, and really understand kind of how it's evolved over time and what it's there to teach them.
Fascinating. Wow. I think it's so important, I think, for everyone to be doing this kind of work. And then oftentimes I wonder, why people end up doing it when it's not like too late, but oftentimes when like disease happens. What's your philosophy on this process for folks who are, even if they consider themselves like healthy, like should they still be doing this kind of work?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the type of thing where disease will, anything that's not made conscious by kind of like this deep type of work, will present itself as some form of life dysfunction, whether it's a disease process or just like repeated relationship trauma, or repeated heartbreak, or dysfunction in the career realm, or in unrewarding relationships, you name it. It's going to show up one way or another. So it's basically our lives and our experiences are reflections of the work that we need to do on some level. And so, we can be proactive, and we can get this work done, before it manifests in a way that we don't want, and I think the benefits are almost innumerable. Like, it's like, because many people live lives of quiet desperation, where maybe they don't have a health challenge, or maybe they're in a marriage, and they have like kind of externally what they think they want in their life, but they're not on fire. They're not fully satisfied. They're not like thriving on to the possible level that they could be. So I think that the only way you can have that is by clearing the vessel, like literally, like removing all of these clouding lenses that are affecting the way that we view the world, and affecting our projections onto other people and situations, and our perceptions, and how we perceive the things that are happening to us in our life. And so many of us are kind of enslaved by our knee-jerk emotional reactions to things, which really is a form of enslavement. When we have the power to kind of step back and decide how we're going to feel, because it's like, I think the path of the warrior and the master is to almost divorce your emotional reactions from external events, and that was like brought home so clearly during the COVID era, where so many people were just taking in the media and the kind of living in fear and all of that, and other people were like, okay, I'm not buying into that. I'm going to create my own reality here. I'm going to kind of be in command of my own emotional experience, and that freed them up to almost live a parallel life that was much more rewarding.
That's beautiful. Wow. So in your book, you talk about relationships. What are some of the essential factors that allow a relationship to become a vessel for transformation?
Well, I think number one is just realizing that that is what it can be. To understand that invariably a relationship is going to kind of shed light on our dark spots and bring up our stuff, so it's like it's going to allow us to become aware of what was we were previously unconscious to. And I think that when you understand that relationships are going to trigger our deepest wounds and kind of shed light on our stored traumas, then it allows us to really see that what comes up as a profound gift. And I think that is one thing. And the other is, if we realize that we have to do our own work in order to have a satisfying experience with someone else. So if something comes up for us, we, instead of blaming the other person for what's coming up for us, we do our own work around what's coming up. That's going to help the relationship. So I think that's another ingredient. And then the final one is just commitment. I think that it's, when you're dealing with this kind of the sensitive nature of these things coming up, you need to know that the other person isn't going to leave the moment the going gets rough. I think that allows for, a kind of like a safe space to deal with what comes up. And I think, not that I certainly do not agree that relationships have to be continuously difficult and, always kind of pulling scabs off old wounds and, like having dramatic stuff coming up all the time. I don't think that at all. I think that there's going to be a tiny bit of that happening. But the more you can take responsibility for what comes up, the faster you get through the rough spots. And I think you can kind of move through to a place of joy, where you have mutual respect for one another and mutual care and really, invest yourself in helping the other person live their best life.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think that's such an important point, especially since, during the pandemic, so many relationships the container got tighter and tighter. So, the shadows definitely have come out. So, Beth, I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about foods and water. What are some of the foods that we can eat to energize the body?
Such a good question. Well, I'd say green vegetables have the greatest degree of life force in them. And I think we want to take in foods to the best of our abilities with the highest life force quotient possible. And you look at the greens that you maybe pick up from the farmer's market or all the fresh fruits and vegetables that you get there, they almost appear to kind of vibrate and glow with life. And that should be a criterion that we have when we're looking at what we want to ingest, is like, how much life does it look like it contains? You just look at a fresh vegetable versus like cereal in a box, and you can usually, anyone can kind of say which one has the highest life force left, because it's like everything has life force to a degree. But when something's fresh and in its original form, it's going to have a higher degree of energy to exchange with our system. And then on a chemical level, that the vegetables and things have higher amounts of electrons that can provide antioxidant support in our system, and still contain vitamins and minerals and things that our bodies need to thrive. So I'd say green vegetables, and then other categories of foods that are so incredibly vital for our good health are fats. So, fats throughout my career of 25 years, have gone through periods of being absolutely demonized to, now coming back around and being embraced. But I've never in my entire career not seen them as probably one of the most essential foods that we ingest, because all of our cell membranes are comprised of fat. And I've always been super interested in the brain for many reasons. And it's like the brain is mostly fat. We've got the membranes of our neurons that are vibrating with, in accord with the nature of the essential fatty acids and the different fats in our cell membranes. And this vibratory aspect of the fats in our membranes are really what allow our brains, and even all of our cells for that matter, to function as these vibratory oscillators that resonate with information in the field, almost like a radio receiver. And so I highly recommend that you include healthy fats in your diet, like avocado and fresh nuts and seeds, and then even some saturated fat like butter and ghee and egg yolk, and then coconut oil and some sesame oil and things like that, and some fat from animal proteins and things. So that's, I'd say, a vital thing. And then we also want to have some protein in our diet as well, whether it's plant-based or animal is up to you, but you're going to need some protein to stabilize your blood sugar and all of that. So I would say what you eat is absolutely essential to your health and vitality. And then you were asking about water, and I'd say water is like my favorite thing to put in my body. It honestly is. It's like, it is, we are 99% water by number of molecules. Water is absolutely everywhere. There's not a space at all in the body where water isn't. And we're learning that it just plays an incredible role with orchestrating our physiology, dictating kind of the expression of our genes, influencing the function of our proteins, providing the charge that actually fuels a lot of our chemical reactions, kind of providing the charge that even influences the movement of our blood cells through our blood vessels. Water is incredibly vital. And when we're replete with water, we function more as we should, like a liquid crystal. So we have this fluid kind of crystalline matrix within our body that facilitates the flow and transfer of energy and information. And we were previously talking about the biofield and the kind of coherent laser light in a healthy human biofield. Well, when we're replete with water, there's almost like a series of interfaces. So you have the energy of the unified field that's kind of infinitely dense with energy and information. And then you have the coherent field of the human biofield. And then you have the water, the liquid crystalline aspect of our bodies. And the biofield serves as like an amplifying conduit of energy and information. And then the water serves as another amplifying conduit. And it allows for the orchestration of our physiology.
And what about Dr., I'm going to maybe butcher this name, Montagne's study?
Dr. Montagne. Yeah. So he's he just passed. He was originally awarded the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the HIV virus. And then he, after that, moved into studying water. And he did a variety of really important experiments that influenced our thinking about water and water's special properties. And one of the landmark studies he did, he showed that water could retain information. He took DNA from one of his HIV-infected patients, and he was able to measure the vibratory signature of the DNA with a special instrument. and record that. And then he projected that information signature. Well, let me back up and say that first what he did is he put the DNA from an HIV infected patient into water and almost made a homeopathic dilution of it. So, put it into water, shook it vigorously, took 1/10 of that, put it into another vial of water, shook it up, took 1/10 of that, put it in another vial, and sequentially diluted it down until there were no more molecules of DNA in the sample of water. Then he used this instrument, which he had previously also used on DNA itself, and he was able to measure the vibratory signature of the DNA in the water, even though there were no more molecules of the DNA left in the water. He recorded that signature digitally, and then he took it a step further and he projected that digital signature wire, through the internet to a lab in Italy. So he did his original research in France, and we projected that signature to a lab in Italy where researchers played that digital information signature to vials of water. And Dr. Montagne said it's like the vials of water listen to the sound of that signature. And then they had vials of water that didn't listen to the sound of the signature. And they put individual nucleotides and polymerase enzymes, so nucleotides are the building blocks of DNA, and polymerase enzyme is required to construct DNA. So he put nucleotides and enzymes into the vials of water that had listened to the signature of the DNA. And those vials were able to reconstruct the DNA, and the vials of water that had not listened to the signature could not. And then they took the DNA out of the water and they did PCR analysis on it and found that it was 98% similar to the original DNA in his lab in France.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So basically, I think without a doubt, and most people cannot refute his research because he's a Nobel Prize winning scientist. Without a doubt, demonstrated that water retains information, and then that information can actually do work.
Wow. So that is a bit terrifying, considering that there's probably information in our drinking water that we may not want to ingest.
Precisely. And that's, why I think it's absolutely vital that, of course, we, stop dumping chemicals into our water, and we really work on, kind of moving away from dissonant, industrial practices and really start realizing that, we're 99% water, and the health of our bodies and every other living thing on earth absolutely depends on water. So that's for one. And for two, until we can kind of make that transition from dissonant industrial practices to resonant industrial practices, we need to really work on not only filtering the water, but actually removing dissonant energetic signatures as well.
What do you do to do that with your own water? Or do you just...
That's a very good question. And I think that removing is one thing, transmuting is quite another. So ultimately, I think that even in the human body, when we talk about dissonant energetic signatures, I think that we want to move to the concept of transmutation, transmuting them. And I think that in the human body, that we can accomplish that by exposing ourselves to coherent fields, being out in the coherent field of nature, undisturbed nature, for example, or cultivating higher states of consciousness, like emotional states of bliss and peace and things like that. Those emotional states can have a transmuting effect on dissonant signatures. And I think we are going to create technologies that will do it as well.
Fascinating. Oh, I can't wait for that day. And why do you think that this subject is important, Beth? Why did you dedicate so much of your life to this world?
Well, I think that, we're somewhat running out of time on the planet, and unless we change our ways, and I think that we first need to understand that we are all part of one grand thing. We are all part of this incredible field of energy and information. We're derived from it, and we are inextricably connected to the field itself and to every single thing that emerges out of the field. And when we really grok that, it's going to change how we do everything. It's going to change how we, you know, how we grow food, how we treat the human body, how we treat our fellow human beings, how we derive fuel, and how we derive kind of mineral resources and send information. It's going to change our communication systems and our transportation systems and all of that. And, I think that when we realize we're all one thing, we will no longer tolerate dissonant industrial practices at all.
Yes, yes, yes. Amen. I love that. Yeah, I think it's the idea of this connection to the field and the connection to everything. Something I am hoping that we can collectively, as a majority, move towards, because it's been interesting just to see the polarities that exist in this world. So I'm with you 100%. So Beth, what about the things that have surprised you the most on this journey? You've been in this practice for 25 years. Has there anything that kind of surprised you? Could be about, the stories of healing. It could be about medicine and spirituality. I mean, what has surprised you the most?
Well, one thing was what I've learned from studying physics is that matter is not static. Matter is forming and annihilating perhaps trillions of times per second, like flickering in and out of existence. And so when you really kind of grok that, really, really, really contemplate that, it opens up a lot of possibilities. Because if we, as a multicellular complex organism, are forming and annihilating trillions of times per second, there's got to be something orchestrating our reformation every trillionth of a second. And it gives us an opportunity to form anew. So I think that it's opened up my mind to the possibility of rapid or more spontaneous healing.
So we have a choice really in our destiny and in our life, and we can drastically change our life, in many ways. I'm curious if you also have a story of healing that you could talk about. Obviously, not you don't have to include the name, but if there's anything that just is memorable that you want to share with our audience.
Wow, there's so many. Well, one story that I do put in my book is a story of a profound transformation with someone I know. So this was spontaneous. So he was he had a very crippling arthritic condition called HLA-B27, which is an autoimmune rheumatological process where his joints were like chronically swollen and inflamed and incredibly painful. And he had to be on non-steroidal anti-inflammatories in very large doses to function at all. But he was still, incredibly disabled. And one night while he was sleeping, he awoke with a start, and almost like he was kind of catapulted against the end of his bed. And he said that he spent hours in a state of bliss, and he understood kind of beyond words the kind of nature, the loving nature of this unified field of intelligence and energy and information that he was derived from, and that everything emerges from. And, he was so kind of like in awe of the grand design of all of this. And he spent about 6 hours in this state of just, this high vibrational state of bliss. And then the next day, his arthritic condition spontaneously remitted.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that's so powerful. Love it. Wow. So Beth, are there any books or resources that you can share with us, maybe resources that might be helpful other than your book, of course, The Pristine Blueprint? We will add the link to the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Francesca McCartney has written some books that, one book that's been around for quite some time, and she's in the process or maybe has just released a second book. Highly recommend that for learning kind of like a practice that you can do to clear your own energetic field. And Dr. Pollack is probably the world's leading water researcher in the world right now, and he wrote a book called the fourth phase of water. Love that. That was a huge influence to me. We've referenced David Hawkins' Power versus Force. Highly recommend that. And Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert.
Right. I'll have to check that out. Amazing. And Beth, what do you want to tell our listeners about their health and wellness and well-being? What's your main takeaway?
Main takeaway is that the trajectory of your health and your life is really in your control. And you can have a profound influence on your health by clearing your own energetic system, by managing your thoughts and the emotional responses those thoughts generate in you, by really choosing how you're going to respond to external circumstances, by choosing high life force quotient foods and drinking half your body weight in ounces of pure, ideally structured water every day, and then just by truly understanding that your health is malleable and that you are part of this beautiful field of energy and information connected inextricably with the field itself and with everyone else within this field. And there is a new opportunity every trillionth of a second to form anew.
Thank you so much, Beth. And where can people find you? What's your website link?
Well, you've got bethmcdougallmd.com and my clinic site, which is clearcenterofhealth.com, and a new venture that I am part of, which is a biooptimization lab called JyzenLabs.com.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Beth. This was such an enlightening conversation and so timely. For those of you who are listening, check out The Pristine Blueprint, Reversing Disease and Improving Longevity. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening in this episode. We want to thank Dr. Beth McDougall for her time, and you can tune into Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.